Hello everyone and welcome back to our virtual Mishnah Berurah shiur. We are holding in Mishnah Berurah Chelik Beis, and Emir Hashem today we will be learning Daf Pei Amid Beis. Now we're going to start a new Siman today. We're going to begin Siman Kuf Ayin Ches. However, before we get to Siman Kuf Ayin Ches, we have a drop of unfinished business from Siman Kuf Ayin Zayin, which begins on the very bottom line of the Mishnah Berurah on Daf Pei Amid Aleph, where the Mishnah Berurah gives a beautiful little summation of the halachas that apply when you eat preface in middle of a seudah. Before we begin, our learning should be a schus for Achenu Kol Beis Yisrael, Hanesunim Batzara Ubashivya, Ha'imdim Bein Bayam Ubein Bayabasha, Hamakim Yirachem Aleihem V'Yitziim Yitzara L'Rvacha Me'afelu La'ira U'Mishiba L'Geula Hashta Bagala V'Zman Kariv V'Neimar Amen. Our learning should be a schus refuah shalema for Ariel ben Yosef and Meir ben Chai Sarah. They should have a refuah shalema b'sar shar Chayei Yisrael. So, if we go to Pei Amid Aleph, bottom line in the Mishnah Berurah, says the Chafetz Chaim, Kitzer dine peiros habayim b'sarich haseudah. Here we have a little summation of the halachas that apply when you eat fruit teich haseudah. So just again, the Aleph Beis, the Siman Kuf Ayin Zayin 101, is that peiros are considered dvarim habayim b'sarich haseudah sheloi machmas haseudah. By default, we don't consider peiros to be something that are ba machmas haseudah. It's not a seudah food. By default, we look at it as something that comes likinuach, something that comes to refresh, something that comes to put a pleasant taste in the mouth. That's not seudah food. Since by default it's not seudah food, it is not covered by the berachow rishona of hamotzi, with certain exceptions. We've gone through the details in the last several shiurim. Now the Mishnah Berurah does a very beautiful job, of course, of tying it up. Says the Chafetz Chaim, Kitzer dine peiros habam b'sarich haseudah. A kitzer, a short summation of the halachas of peiros that you eat in middle of the seudah. Says the Chafetz Chaim, it depends. Im oichel im hapas, if you eat that fruit together with bread. So if you have a sliced up apple, and you take slices of apple and you eat it together with your challah, together with your bread, in that case, says the Chafetz Chaim, pshita, it's obvious, she'ein tzarich klal bracha. Then you absolutely do not need a berachow rishona. Why? Denasa tafel apas. Because whatever you eat together with the bread is instantly considered a tafel to the pas, and we spoke about this yesterday, the mechanics of ikr and tafel. Once it's a tafel to the pas, so the Mishnah Berurah says the hamotzi that you made on the pas is going to cover the apple slice that you eat together with the pas. And, says the Chafetz Chaim, this is true. It doesn't have to be that when you made the hamotzi, you spied a plate of apple slices on the table, and you had in mind, I want my hamotzi to go on the apple. It doesn't matter. You eat the apple in the middle of the seudah together with challah, it's covered by the hamotzi. Now, I do want to point out that there's a very interesting little, not exception to what the Mishnah Berurah said, but there's a chilik between two cases. What if you would read this Chafetz Chaim that we just said, what the Chafetz Chaim seems to be saying is, you ate a slice of apple together with your challah? No shilas. I don't want to even hear about it. You eat a peri, you eat a fruit together with the bread, it's instantly a tafel to the bread, it's covered by the hamotzi. Even if you didn't have das beferish, that the hamotzi should cover the apple. We saw yesterday what at first glance would seem to be an exception to this rule, and that is, one of the halachas we learned yesterday, we learned it in the final sif of Kuf Ayin Zayin, sif hey. We learned if you're sitting and you're eating a meal, and then there's a knock on the door, and somebody comes from 2 blocks over, and they bring you a fruit platter as a gift, even if they bring you a meat board as a gift, and meat, that's dvar mapar machmas haseudah, you have to make a bracha on the stuff that came, because you had absolutely no idea that it was going to come. Now, over there, the Mishnah Berurah said, you have to make a bracha on that food that came from the neighbor that you didn't expect to come, even, said the Mishnah Berurah, nice cut and chaf, even if you eat it together with the bread. So that means if somebody brought in a totally unexpected meat board and you want to take some pastrami off the meat board and you want to eat it with your challah, you still need a berachow rishona. You need to make a shakal on the pastrami. Kal v'chomer ben benoy shel kal v'chomer, if it's not pastrami, if it's an apple. An apple is always a davar abba shaloi machmas seudah. Anyway, with prejudice that you should need a berachow rishona on the apple. But it came from the neighbor. You got to make a berachow rishona even if you eat it together with the pas. So it's not like a golden 100% across the board ironclad rule that if you eat something together with the pas, it never needs a berachow rishona. The difference is that in yesterday's case of sivhei, where we're talking about food that we had zero expectation that it should come, the reason that needs a bracha, even if you eat it together with pas, is what the Mishnah Berurah says on yesterday's shiur, in Mishnah Berurah's cut and chaf. He says the reason it needs a bracha, shebevadai loy haya daitai aleihem klal. Because over there was no dream in a million years that food would come. So there's no way to say that your hamaitzi that you made at the beginning of the meal is going to cover that food. In today's summary in Sif Kav Kufay and Zion, the Mishnah Berurah is talking about you're eating a seudah, you're in your house, you're eating a seudah, your wife brought a sliced up Cortland apple to the table, you want to take a slice of the Cortland apple and you want to eat it together with challah. Over there, the Mishnah Berurah says you don't need a berachow rishona, and it's covered by the bracha on the pas because of ikar and tafel, even if you didn't have das beferish. You hear the difference? When the food came from the neighbor, the Mishnah Berurah said, Lo yahaya daita olav klal. There's no way that your das, when you made the hamaitzi, incorporated the food that came from the neighbor. In a million years, you didn't expect that food to come. The Cortland apple from your kitchen, we're not going to say Lo yahaya daita olav klal. We'll say you didn't have das beferish to cover it. But there is a certain level of das on whatever comes out of your kitchen. So over there, it's a nasa tafel to the pas, and it's covered by the pas. Okay, so the first rule that the Chafetz Chaim tells us in his kitzer over here is, if you eat peiros during the seudah, if you eat it together with the pas, it becomes a tafel to the pas, it does not need a berachow rishona. V'im oichel b'loy pas, if you take a slice of apple without bread and you eat it during the seudah, so then, says the Chafetz Chaim, pshita shetzarich bracha lifneim, then you must make a bracha on that slice of apple. Va'afilu heim mivushalim, even if it's cooked apple, even if it's like a compote, he says you have to make a bracha in the middle of the seudah. To have a shaloi machmas seudah, because we assume that this is something that is ba shaloi machmas seudah, rak lekinuach ba'alma. It's something which is for kinuach. If it's for kinuach, it needs a berachow rishona. Aval, however, im roitza lechel peros ktsas im hapas uktsas b'loy pas. But let's say there's fruit on the table. You want to eat some with bread. You want to eat some without bread. Bazeh yesh te'ez chalukos. Over here, we learned over the last few days that there are dissenting opinions. We have the Mechaber said you could get away with having your first slice of apple with challah, your last slice of apple with challah, and in the middle, you can eat as much apple as you want without challah. The Mishnah Berurah brought down that the Achronim don't like this. The Achronim say, no, not a good idea. Not a good idea. Take a slice of apple without bread and make a berachow and cover all the apple that you're going to eat during the seudah. So says the Mishnah Berurah, you want to try to eat some fruit with pas, some fruit without pas. Says the Mishnah Berurah, yesh te'ez chalukos. Alkein, therefore, yesh linoig, the proper way to comport yourself is, sheyochad tchila ma'at b'loy pas, you should take right away a piece of apple without bread, v'yavarech aleihen, and you should make a bracha, berachow on the apple, v'achakach yuchal lechel shar peiros, then you can eat as much fruit as you want, bein b'pas, whether with bread or bein b'loy pas, because you cover it with the berachow that you make. But, says the Mishnah Berurah, Vizehu, this whole discussion is this is when you're making a seudah out of other food. You're making a seudah out of steak. You're making a seudah out of minute roast. You're making a seudah out of salmon and mashed potatoes, etc., etc. But if you made a peris tish, if you made a seudah out of a fruit platter, and you're not having meat and chicken and fish, etc., etc., then peris and pas, then once you take a little bit of the peris together with challah, with pas, you chalecho b'seif peris b'loi pas b'loi bracha. You could continue eating peris even without pas, without a separate bracha rishona. We saw in the berachow that means that at first, at the beginning of the seudah, you have to eat at least a significant amount of the peris together with pas. Okay, and that closes out Siman Kuf Ayin Zayin. Now, I will mention that over this whole discussion of Dvarim Abar Machmas HaSeudah, Dvarim Abar Shaloi Machmas HaSeudah, we saw differences of opinion amongst the Paiskim. Most prominently, we saw even in the Mishnah Berurah how the Chafetz Chaim says that if you're having kompot for dessert, you must make a bracha rishona. You must make a preface. Yet there's testimony, Ma'aser Rav and the Chafetz Chaim, that the Chafetz Chaim ate kompot at the end of the meal without making a preface. There are those that suggest that he changed his mind. There are those that say that he did not, that it's not true. There are differences of opinion amongst the Paiskim how to deal with these things, especially because over time you see that the format of meals do change. We saw from the Chazon Ish that the Chazon Ish ate a banana in the middle of the meal, and he did not make he didn't make a bracha on the banana because he considered the banana an ikar part of his seudah. He considered it to be something that he was eating as a seudah food. He wasn't just eating it l'kinuach. So a certain amount of this depends on how you act during your meal and what you're using the different foods for. We saw the question of appetizers. If you have a half a grapefruit as an appetizer, if you have an ambrosia as an appetizer, is that considered dvar mabam machmas hasuda because it's an appetizer, or is it not considered an appetizer? So again, it gets tied up in minhagim. It gets tied up in the different shittas amongst the heintik paiskim. If you have shilas, I would suggest that each one should ask their rav that they ask their shilas to. Ask your rav that you ask your shilas to, and follow his psak. But at least now, when you do ask the shilah and you get the psak halacha, you have the background and you understand what's at play. Okay. Now we move along to Peyam Beis Siman Kuf Ayin Ches Ezed Dvarim Kruyim Hefsek B'Seudah. What creates a hefsek in middle of your seudah that's going to require you to make a new bracha rishona? So you're sitting down to a seudah, you washed on the tilas yadayim, you made hamaitzi. You made a bracha of hamaitzi, you covered the bracha rishona on your challah, you covered the bracha rishona on all of the foods that are boyim machmas hasuda, and right now, everything is fine. You're going to sit down to eat, you're going to enjoy your meal, and you're not going to make, really, for the most part, any more brachas. But now something happened, and it caused you to make a hefsek in your seudah. What constitutes a hefsek, an interruption in your seudah, that makes you lose the bracha rishona that you made? You made a hamaitzi in the beginning of the meal, but that's as long as you're still involved in the meal. What constitutes a hefsek, an interruption in the meal, that may require you to go ahead and make a new bracha rishona? It might even require you to bench on what you already ate. What makes a hefsek? So, says the Mishnah Berurah, before we even go into the mechaber, this is one of those simanim where the Mishnah Berurah has a very beautiful hakdama to the siman, which lets you know right away that it's a very complex sugya. Says the Mishnah Berurah, Hine, mipnei sha'siman hazeh yesh by pratim rabim. Since the siman that we're about to embark on has many variables and many complex details. Al kain, therefore, akdim lo zeh hakdama kitzara. I'm going to make a short hakdama kidei lahakel al hama'ayin, to make it easier for the one who's coming to learn and understand and be ma'ayin in these halachas. Hine, be'inyan shinoi mokim. When it comes to the question of shinoi mokim in middle of a seudah, what's shinoi mokim? Says the Mishnah Berurah in the brackets, hainu, this means, shehischel lechel, you started to eat your seudah, and then in middle of your seudah, v'halach lemokim acher, you got up from your table, and you went somewhere else. V'roitza lechel sham, and now you want to eat over there. Or sheroitza lachza lebekami arishain, or maybe you got up from your table, you went somewhere else, you made a shinoi mokim, now you're coming back to your table, and you want lachza lebekami arishain, you want to go back to your original place, v'lechel sham, and you want to continue eating. So this is the question of shinoi mokim. You were sitting by your dining room table, you made all the appropriate brachas, you made a beautiful hamaitzi on your pas, you were in the middle of eating, but now you had a shinoi mokim. You got up off your table, and you went to the car to go get something from the car. You realized you left your phone in the car. So you left the house, and you went out to your car. Or you got up, and the baby was crying, so you got up from the dining room table, and you went upstairs to the baby's bedroom to go get the baby. In the first case that I just gave you, you actually left the house. In the second case that I gave you, you didn't leave the house, but you went from one room to another room. You went from downstairs to upstairs. Or maybe you got up from the dining room table and you went to the kitchen to go get the mustard. So again, you went to a different room. Or maybe you have a very, very, very large dining room, and you got up from your seat at the head of the table in the dining room, and you went all the way 32 feet across the room to go get a sefer because you wanted to say a dvar Torah. In all of these places, to some degree, you made a shinoi mokim. You got up from where you were when you made the berachow of hamaitzi, you left. Now maybe you want to come back and you want to continue eating. But to continue eating, you're continuing to eat on the smach of the original berachow that you made. You're relying on the original berachow rishona. Or maybe you got up and you want to go eat somewhere else. Maybe you got up from the dining room because the air conditioning wasn't working very well, and you decided, I don't want to eat in the dining room anymore. And you went down to the basement where it's cooler, and you have a table downstairs in the basement, and now you want to eat in the basement. So you went to a different room in the house, and you want to continue eating over there. Again, you made a shinoi mokim, you went to a different place, and you want to continue eating in that different place on the smach of the original berachow that you made. Is this a problem, or is it not? So, says the Mishnah Berurah, Kaimalon, we paskin, that when you do make a shinoi mokim, now we're going to have to see what constitutes a shinoi mokim, but if you do actually make a shinoi mokim, Kaimalon de tzarich lachzor levarich, you need to make a new berachow. So, we have this question of shinoi mokim, but one thing is for sure, says the Chafetz Chaim, if you really make a bona fide shinoi mokim, you lose the original berachow that you made, and you have to make a new berachow. Question is, what constitutes a shinoi mokim? Another question is going to be, is this true by all foods, or is it true by only certain types of foods? So says the Chafetz Chaim, V'yesh bazeh shloisha dvarim shetzarich levar. There are primarily three different variables that we need to deal with when we approach this shaila of shinoi mokim. And he lays them out for us. Aleph. The first variable that we have to deal with is mahu shinoi mokim. What constitutes a shinoi mokim? Im mibayis labayis. Do you have to leave your house and go to a different house? Is that what a shinoi mokim is? Oim echeder lecheder. Or how about if you go from one room in your house to another room in your house? Is that a shinoi mokim? So the first thing that we have to decide when we're approaching this shaila is, what actually constitutes a shinoi mokim? And then just to understand this in your head, nobody is suggesting that if you're sitting by the dining room table and you swap seats with your wife, that constitutes a shiur malkum. That's not a shiur malkum. You're still sitting by the dining room table, so that's not a shiur malkum. Moving your chair a foot to the left is not a shiur malkum, right? So the question is, what is a shiur malkum? Do you have to actually leave the house to be a shiur malkum? How do you change rooms? Is that a shiur malkum? So that's the first variable, beis. Second variable is, be'ezet dvarim shayich din shiur malkum. By what foods is there a shiloh of shiur malkum? Does shiur malkum affect the bracha on all foods? Or is it possible that the halach of shiur malkum only affects certain types of foods and not others? Now you're asking, why would that be? Well, you'll see. Gimel. Variable number 3. Im shiur malkum. Okay, let's say you did make a shiur malkum, and let's say you made a shiur malkum in the context of eating a food that is affected by the halacha of shiur malkum. Madina bazeh. Okay, what precisely is the halacha once you make a shiur malkum? So those are the 3 variables. Variable number 1, what exactly constitutes a shiur malkum? Variable number 2, what kind of foods and brachas are affected by shiur malkum? Question number 3, okay, let's say you did make a shiur malkum. What precisely is the halacha? What do you do once you've made a shiur malkum? Says the Chafetz Chaim, v'nachzer levar echad echad. And now I will explain to you how we deal with each one of these variables. Okay, so variable number 1. Inyan shiur malkum hu, what constitutes a shiur malkum? Says the Chafetz Chaim, loy mibayeh. We don't even need to ask. It's obvious. Im halach be'emtza achilosai mibayeh zeh lebayes acher. If you get up in the middle of your Friday night seudah and you decide you want to go to your friend Siman because Siman is making a shalom zaka tonight, so smack in the middle of your seudah, you get up, you leave your house, and you go to Siman's house before you bench, before anything else, bevada you have a shiur malkum. That is definitely 100% a problematic shiur malkum. You left your house and you went to another house. Continues the Chafetz Chaim. I'll tell you even better. Even if you just walked out of the door of your house, in the middle of your meal, that's also a shiur malkum. So you got up Friday night, middle of the seudah, and you have a shalom zaka tonight, and somebody told you, boy, Daddy, it's really cold outside. So you decide that in the middle of the seudah, in the middle of the soup, you want to see just how cold it is. So you get up from the dining room table, you go to the front door, you open the door, you leave the house. Shiur malkum. Now you turn around and you come back into the house, you already did a shiur malkum. What you're going to have to do, we're going to see. That's going to be question number 3. What do you do once you make a shiur malkum? But that is certainly, says the Chafetz Chaim, a shiur malkum. Now you'll tell me, well, what if I had das? What if I had das when I made my hamoitzi that I might step outside of the house for a minute? A lot of people think that das is this like magical catch-all. As long as I had das, I'm good. So what if I made my hamoitzi and I had das when I made the hamoitzi? I'm going to walk out of the house for a minute. Says the Mishnah Berurah. No, das doesn't help for a shiur malkum. If you make a bona fide shiur malkum, you lost your bracha. And so far the Chafetz Chaim has told me that what so far constitutes a bona fide shiur malkum, you left your house and you went to somebody else's house. Or you just left your house. You walked out the front door and now you want to come back in. Shiur malkum. Continues the Chafetz Chaim. Even if you just went from one room in the house to another room in the house, a lot of poskim hold that even that's a shiur malkum. Now don't get excited, because we're going to see that we paskin not that way, but you have to have this in mind. You have to realize that there are poskim that hold that even going from one room to another room constitutes a shiur malkum. We'll have to see the berachow. However, when it comes to the question of going from one room to another room, Says the Chafetz Chaim, yesh chilik. Going from one room to another room in the same house is clearly different, says the Chafetz Chaim, than going from your house to somebody else's house or going outside your front door. In what way? Ach bazeh yesh chilik. If, when you made your hamoitzi, you had in mind that you're going to go from one room to another room, mutter, then you're okay. Why? Since you're under one roof, you're in one house, so the shini makom mecheder lecheder is more kal than the shini makom of going from leaving your house and going to somebody else's house or walking outside your house, outside to the street. Because over there, if you go to somebody else's house or you leave your front door, the fact that you had das when you made damaitzi that you're going to do that doesn't help you. But to go from one room in your house to another room in your house, says the Chafetz Chaim, having das definitely helps you. We're going to see that the Heintika Paiskim say, nowadays, by our houses and our sudas, it is given as a default. It's taken as a given that when you make your berachow hamaitzi, you know that you're going to wander around the house and you're going to go mecheder lecheder, and we don't recognize going mecheder lecheder as a problematic shina makom at all. Halacha lamaisa. But you see how the Chafetz Chaim treats it. The Chafetz Chaim says a lot of places can say mecheder lecheder is a shina makom. Okay, if you had das that you're going to do it, you're okay. We paskin stam das. Stam is that you had das that you're going to go from one room to another room, and as long as you're in the same house, you're okay. Okay, now the Chafetz Chaim goes to another degree. How about umizavis lizavis, which means from one side of the room to another side of the room? Is it possible that that's a shina makom? Says the Chafetz Chaim, no. Umizavis lizavis, from one side of the room to the other side of the room, afilu traklin gadol, even if you're in a big banquet hall. So you're in Oak Terrace, you're in one of the big chasana halls, and you go from one end to the other end, that's not a shina makom. Lo have a shina makom klal, that's definitely not a shina makom. Kevinchu cheder echad, because it's all one room. Ve'in tzarich klal daitel lezeh, you don't need das to say that I have das when I made my hamaitzi, that I'm going to go from one end of the room to the other end of the room. No, it's one cheder. It's brought down, this is even true for the men's section to the women's section, etc., etc. Okay, so we have now covered what the Mishnah Berurah said was question number 1. What constitutes a shina makom? Says the Chafetz Chaim, you leave your house, you go to somebody else's house, absolutely a shina makom. You walk out your front door and you leave your house, absolutely a shina makom. You go from cheder to cheder, from room to room in your own house. So the Mishnah Berurah said, there are poskim that say that that's a problem. But if you had das when you made the hamaitzi, that you're going to go from room to room, then it's okay. I'm telling you, we're going to see the poskim, the Heintika poskim, that say that from room to room, you don't need special das. Stam das it is that you're going to wander around your house. Okay. Next question. Ube'ezeh dvarim shayich shina makom? The Chafetz Chaim raised a question. By what foods? He says, Ube'ezeh dvarim. Which things? He means which foods? Which brachas over which foods are affected by shina makom? Ube'ezeh dvarim shayich shina makom? Oh, isa bazeh plukta b'gemara. Here we have a machlokes amaroyim in Masechtas Pesachim. Machlokes Rav Sheshes and Rav Chisda. The Rav Sheshes Savar, Rav Sheshes holds, Bein imachal pas, whether we're talking about a hamaitzi on bread, ubein sha'achal peros, or if you made a bari priya eitz on an apple, usha'are mashkin, or you made a shahakol on a coffee, dinam shava bezeh, de tzarich lachzor levarich. Rav Sheshes holds that the question of shinoi makom affects equally something like hamaitzi on bread. If you make a shina makom after you made a hamaitzi on bread, you're going to have to make a new hamaitzi. If you made a shahakal on a coffee, says Rav Sheshes, you made a shahakal on a coffee and then you made a bona fide shina makom, you got to make a new shahakal. if you want to continue drinking your coffee. Or even if you want to drink your coffee somewhere else. You made a coffee in the kitchen, and you made a shahakal, and now you walked out the front door, and you want to drink the coffee in the street. Rav Sheshes says you made a shina makom. You walk out of the house, you need a new shahakal. That sheet is Rav Sheshes. Rav Chisda Savar, Rav Chisda is more mekel. Very cute chap, Rav Chisda. Rav Chisda Savar, Davke im ochal davar she'ein ta'en bracha b'mekaymai. The only time shina makom becomes a problem, says Rav Chisda, is when you make a bracha on something that does not require you to make a bracha achroina in the same place as you made a bracha rishona. Where Rav Chisda wants to say is, kigoin peres and mashkin. For instance, you made a ha'etz on an apple, or you made a shahakal on a coffee. She'ein mechuyev dafka levarech bracha achroina shelhen b'mekayim harishon. When you make a bar pre-eitz on an apple, the bracha achroina is going to be a bar nefashis. There is no halacha that says that you have to make the bar nefashis on the apple in the same place that you made the bracha rishona of bar pre-eitz on the apple. If you make a shahakal on a coffee, there's no halacha that says that you have to make the bracha bar nefashis on the coffee in the same place that you made the shahakal on the coffee. Val kain, and therefore, since the bracha achroina on the apple or on the coffee is not binding you to the place where you made the bracha rishona, Aminan we say, the tekif sha'akar mimenkaimai, the minute you got up and you left the place where you made the bracha rishona, nispatel kviyasai, your kviyus, whatever kviyus you had in that place where you made the bracha rishona, is bottle. And therefore, v'tzark lachzer levarach kishi yitzalech alayt. You made a shina makam, you uprooted yourself, you went somewhere else, you need to make a new bracha to be able to continue eating. Aval lemachal pas, but if you ate bread, v'yesh oimrim du'adin kol davar shu b'shivas aminim, or you had made a mezainis on a piece of cake, or you made a bar priagafen on a glass of wine, shehu davar shetzarach levarach b'mekaymai dafka. Over here, we all know that there's a halacha by benching that you have to bench where you started your seudah. If you made a bar priagafen on wine, you're supposed to make the alagefen in the place where you made the bar priagafen. If you made a mezainis on a piece of cake, you're supposed to make the bracha achas me'en shalosh in the place that you made the mezainis on the cake. So reasons Rav Chisda, al kainam rinan behu, therefore we say by these foods, da'afilu im akar mimakaymai, even if you left the place where you made the bracha rishona, adayin loy nispatel kviyusay harishona. The fact, the presence that you established at the place where you made the bracha rishona is not gone. V'chol heicha sha'oichel, and wherever you went now to continue eating, al das kviyas harishonahu, it's as if you're still bound to your original place. Uki'ilu yoshe b'mekaymai dami, it's as if you're still there. Why? Because ultimately you have to go back, and therefore ein tzarich levarach alav hamaitzi, and therefore you don't have to make a new hamaitzi. Okay, so let's kind of give a little synopsis of the very interesting last few lines that we just saw. One of the questions that the Mishnah Berurah brought up in this Hakdama is, okay, we have this issue of shinui makom. If you make a shinui makom, it's problematic. If you make a bona fide shinui makom, you lose your bracha. You have to make a new bracha. First question was, okay, what constitutes a shinui makom? You'll go to somebody else's house, you leave your house, that constitutes a shinui makom. All right. What brachas and what foods are affected by shinui makom? Here we have a fascinating machlokes Rav Sheshes and Rav Chisda. Rav Sheshes says, I don't care what kind of food it is, I don't care what kind of bracha it is. You washed, and now you made hamaitzi on pas. You walk out of the house, you lost your hamaitzi. You want to come back and you want to eat more pas, you need a new hamaitzi. You want to go to your new place and you want to continue eating in a new place, you need a new hamaitzi. You made a shahakal on a coffee, and you made a shina makom, and you want to drink the coffee somewhere else now, you need a new shahakal. You want to come back and continue eating the coffee where you are? So dugma, you made a coffee in the kitchen, and then you went out of the house. You made a coffee in the kitchen, you made a shahakal, you took a drink, now you walked out of the house to go get the mail. You're leafing through the mail by the mailbox. You come back to the kitchen. You want to keep drinking your coffee. Says Rosh Hashanah, you need a new berachow. You lost your berachow. As soon as you stepped out of the house, you lost your berachow. Now, in order to lose the berachow, you have to be making a shinei makom, which means you uprooted yourself from the place where you made the original berachow. That's what shinei makom is all about. Shinei makom is you uprooted yourself from the place where you made the original berachow, and therefore you lost the berachow. Says Rav Sheshes, again, I don't care what kind of food it is. Once you make a shinei makom, you lost the berachow. Says Rav Chisda, he makes a very technical chilik between different kinds of foods. He says if you make a hamoitzi on pas, you eat some bread in the kitchen, and now you go out to check the mail while you're munching on some bread, it's very hard to say that you uprooted yourself from the kitchen. You know why? Because you got to come back for benching. You made a berachow gafan on a kais of yayin, and you went out to check the mail, and you come back in. Very hard to say that you uprooted yourself from the kitchen, because you need to come back. Because these are things that are tayin bracha b'mekaymai. The berachow achrona requires you to come back. Therefore, the berachow achrona is binding you to the makom harishon. But by a coffee, there's nothing binding you to the makom harishon, because you don't need to come back for the bar nefashis. The bar nefashis you can make wherever you are. So the bar nefashis is not binding you to the makom harishon. So reasons Rav Chisda, shinei makom will affect you by a bite pre-eitz on an apple. It'll affect you by a shakel on a coffee, but it will not affect you by hamoitzi on pas. Because for hamoitzi on pas, you're bound to the makom harishon. So this is the machlokes Rav Sheshes and Rav Chisda. What do the poskim do? Says the Mishnah Berurah, v'nechleku ha-poskim bazeh. Ha-ha. We have a machlokes ha-poskim. Ha-Rambam v'siyatoi. The Rambam and his group of Rishonim that agree with him, pasku k'Rav Sheshes. They paskin like Rav Sheshes to b'chol gavdi tzarich levarich. That a shinei makom will affect all types of foods and all types of brachas, and no matter what you're eating or drinking, you're going to need a new bracha. V'zeu tam shnei ha'seifim harishonim, and that's what we're going to see represented by the mechaber in this siman in Sif Aleph and Sif Beis. We know the mechaber follows the Rambam. V'harosh v'siyatoi, but the Rosh and those that paskin like the Rosh pasku k'Rav Chisda. Them makel and they paskin like Rav Chisda. V'zeu das hagas harama shehuvu b'soif Sif Beis, and that's what we're going to see is the shitas harama when we get to Sif Beis. Okay. Continues the Chafetz Chaim. V'chol zehu le'inyan lachzor levarich. When is this all negeya? This is all negeya to the question of you made a shinei makom. Now are we going to require you to make a new berachow or not? Aval lechatchila ein laker b'mekayim lekuli alma v'chol gavdi. But the shaila is really a shaila b'di'evet. The shaila is you made a shinei makom. Now we have these shilas. But everybody agrees that lechatchila you should not make any shinei makom. Lechatchila, even Rav Chisda would agree, even if you washed and you made a hamoitzi on pas that requires you to come back for the berachow achrona, even Rav Chisda would agree that lechatchila you shouldn't make a shinei makom. Lechatchila you should not go outside and leave the house. Continues the Chafetz Chaim. The third question that he posed. What precisely is the halacha when you did make a shinei makom? What happens now that you made a shinei makom? Says the Chafetz Chaim, Nechleku ha-poskim gam kein pazeh. Here we also have a machlokes ha-poskim. Ha-Rambam v'siyatoi. The Rambam and those who agree with him, Seivrim, they hold, Demisha chazar l'memkaymai b'tchila, when you come back to your original place, tzarich levarich b'rachas hamazon. The Rambam, and again, the Rambam is the one who paskins like Rav Sheshes. So the Rambam holds that shinei makom is a problem even by pas. So let's imagine, according to the Rambam, somebody washed, he's in the middle of his Friday night seudah, and he left the house, he went outside to schmooze with a friend of his in the street. He looked out the window, his dining room window, he saw his good friend walking in the street. He got up from his Shabbos table, he walked out into the street, he's schmoozing with his friend in the street. let's imagine, by the way, that there's nobody else sitting around the table. Because if there are other people sitting around the table, that's also affects the shaila here. But let's imagine he was eating a Shabbos seudah alone for some strange reason. He sees his friend walking outside in the street. He goes outside to the street to shmooze with his friend. He made a shina makam. And according to the Rambam, shina makam is a problem even by pas. He passes like Rav Sheshes. Now he comes back into the house. What should he do? What should he do? He made a bona fide shina makam, so he lost the hamaitzi. He wants to continue eating. What should he do? Does he just make a new hamaitzi? How about benching? Does he just make a new hamaitzi now, continue eating, and then bench and cover everything? Or does he have to bench now? Because he broke his seudah in half. So says the Mishnah Berurah, the Rambam and those who agree with him hold that when he comes back to his original place, the first thing he needs to do is tzarich levarach berachow hamazon. The first thing he has to do is bench. He has to close out the meal that he was mafsik in the middle of. Or if we're talking about a coffee, he has to make a berachow on the coffee that he drank so far. And then then he could make a new berachow rishona al mashu roitz alechalata on what he wants to continue eating. And we're going to see this shita represented in Sif Aleph. But there are other places that hold they ain't tzarich levarich rak berachow rishona al mashu roitz alechal. You don't need a berachow achrona. No, you got up middle of the seudah, you went out to talk to your friend, you came back. You don't have to bench now. No, you need to make a new hamaitzi because you lost the hamaitzi. Make a new hamaitzi, continue eating, and then bench. You don't have to bench twice. The benching at the end of your second meal will cover the first meal as well. And this is the shita that we will see represented by the Ramah in Sif Beis. Ulamaisa naktina nakol kedasa poiska mamuva b'haga. Halacha lamaisa, we're going to follow the shita Ramah. V'yesa prati adinim amistafim lozeh. The other details of all of these dinim, because there are a lot more details here. Yivor hakolim yirtza Hashem v'sech Siman. Be'ez Hashem yisparach. All of the other details will be explained as we work our way through this beautiful Siman. V'ata, now says the Chafetz Chaim, naschi levaris divrei Siman. Now, with this Hakdama, we could go and we could examine the rest of the Siman. We're going to stop over here, and we will continue. We'll start Sif Aleph from Yirtzeh Hashem in the next year. Thank you so much for joining me for limud HaTorah. This is limud HaTorah should be making against Klal Yisrael. The Rosh Hashanah should send Yeshua Sefirus Parnasa Shidduchim to all those in need. We should be Zaychet to the Geula Shleima. The Geula Shleima with the Bias Kail Tzedek B'mherav Yameinu Amen. Be well.